Hello and welcome to session 2, where we're going to be talking about the new and improved histamine bucket. In this session, we're going to be looking at the concept of the histamine bucket and what puts pressure on that. We're going to be looking at some of the histamine clearance pathways. Now, in this session, I do have doctors and healthcare practitioners who are on this course, and some of this can get quite technical, but I will do my best to explain it as easily as possible so that everyone has a clear understanding of what's going on here. And then I'm going to just touch on some of the nutrigenomic influences, and what nutrigenomics is nutrition's effect on our genetics. And then I'm going to talk through a little bit about what I do in clinical practice and what I look at with my clients to reduce the overall load on the histamine bucket. So these are some of the things that I'm looking at when I have people on the health optimization program, and I'm looking at certain components to reduce the overall load of histamine that goes into the bucket and also helps to stabilize the mast cells. So I'm looking at things like artificial light exposure and non-native EMF exposure. And non-native EMF is basically just the electromagnetic frequencies that comes from technology and comes from man-made electromagnetic frequencies. I'm looking at things like circadian misalignment, so that's the disruption between the sleep and the wake cycles. I'm looking at dehydration, medications, supplements, endogenous microbes, which are the microbes that live within our body, so that can relate to the gut microbiome, for instance. And then I'm looking at diet, environment, vitamin and mineral deficiencies, hormone imbalances, and also any current or latent pathogens. And then on top of that, I can look at how your genes or how your enzyme pathways are potentially responding, and you can do that through specific genetic testing. So this rather intimidating slide is showing you how histamine actually gets removed from the body. So when we look at histamine in the gastrointestinal tract, that will go preferentially through the diamine oxidase enzyme pathway. And I've already introduced you to diamine oxidase. So that is the primary enzyme in the digestive tract that will take histamine and shunt it through a pathway to ultimately end up being removed through the urine or via the stool. And you can see here I've put some nutrients. So diamine oxidase, for it to be able to work efficiently, relies on a number of different nutrients, and they are iron, copper, B12, B6, and vitamin C. So once diamine oxidase has done its job, it will pass the metabolite through to the ALD enzyme pathway. And again, you can see this relies on niacin, B6, B2, and magnesium to work effectively. And then ALD will pass its metabolite into the urine or the stool. And that's how kind of histamine from the gut is removed from the body. Now, what's really interesting is that these metabolites that are made from the breakdown of histamine are actually known as aromatic molecules. And what that means is that it has the ability to respond to light, in particular UV light. So experiments have been done on these metabolites, and they've been shown to actually, take in UV light and have a reaction according to that UV light. So this is an interesting concept that I'm going to be introducing and blending in throughout this particular masterclass. Then we have histamine in the circulation. So that's histamine in our bloodstream. So that needs to get removed from the body as well. And that will preferentially go down the HNMT enzyme pathway, which relies on a biochemical reaction called methylation. And we're not going to talk too much about methylation, but understand that methylation relies on nutrition. So it relies on key nutrients such as B12, B6, and folic acid or folate. And it also relies on various minerals, so potassium and magnesium and calcium. So there's a lot of nutritional based interventions that can be done to support the detoxification of histamine. And again, histamine will be shunted through the HNMT enzyme to MAO and then to ALD and then out through the urine. And you can see these enzymes, they all rely on certain nutrients. So B2 here, and then we've got niacin and magnesium here. The other pathway that histamine can go down is the NAT2 pathway. And again, that relies on vitamin B6. And this will go through into the urine and be removed from the body there. But again, you can see these molecules here that are produced from histamine detoxification are all aromatic. So again, it is likely that they are all able to respond to ultraviolet light. So ultimately, what does this mean? Potentially, in the presence of UV light deficiency and also nutrient deficiencies or insufficiencies, it's going to be a lot more difficult for histamine to be removed from the body, and hence there could be a buildup of histamine that causes symptoms. So again, touching on this new concept related to UV. So remember I talked in the first session about histidine being an amino acid, which is taken from protein. So we have protein that comes in through our diet and is broken down into amino acids. And one of those amino acids is called histidine. And histidine will go on to be converted to histamine. Now, what's really important about the chemical structure of this molecule is that it's got this five-sided ring included in the molecule. And it's this five-sided ring that has been shown in experiments to absorb UV light. And you can see with histamine, it's got exactly the same five-sided ring. So histidine and histamine have the ability to respond to ultraviolet frequencies. Now, what's really important here is that histidine doesn't just make histamine. It also makes uricanic acid. And uricanic acid is very important for our skin because it is thought to be the component that provides UV protection from the sun. But it also helps to keep moisture in the skin. It also helps with the immune functioning of the skin, and it also helps with pH regulation. And we need the UV rays from the sun not only to make uricanic acid, but also to help with the conversion of uricanic acid to cis-uricanic acid. And this metabolism pathway is really, really important for providing protection to our skin from ultraviolet radiation. Now you can see again, these conversion pathways are reliant on B vitamins and magnesium, and these components are also aromatic. So all of these components are going to be responding to UV light. So when we are UV light deficient, there is a potential that histidine will preferentially convert to histamine, further contributing to a histamine imbalance or a histamine overload. Now, ultimately, histidine also wants to get down to the end of this pathway to alpha-ketoglutarate acid. And this component feeds into our energy production pathways. So this again, if we've got any blocks in this pathway, it can relate to a decline in energy. There's also another component here, which is at this section of the pathway here. So if this metabolite is shown high in urine, and we can test very easily for this, it can mean that there is a folate deficiency or a folic acid deficiency. So you're going to end up, again, in a folic acid deficiency, you're going to be resulting in a deficiency in energy. So in a nutshell, this particular slide is showing us that in UV light deficient situations and nutritional deficient situations, it is likely that histidine is not going to be able to produce uricanic acid. You're not going to produce the protection on your skin against UV radiation, and you are likely going to be producing excess histamine and have low energy. So what I've been working on in my research and in clinical practice is that I believe that the more histamine that is being produced, it's telling me that you are likely in need of UV light and nutrients as well. So when I'm looking at reducing the histamine bucket and stabilizing mast cells, I take my clients through a health optimization program that looks at these core components: balancing artificial and natural light, balancing non-native EMF with the Earth's natural magnetic fields. I look at circadian retraining. I look at your medications and supplements. I optimize hydration. I look at addressing the oral, nasal, and gut microbiome. I look at the optimal diet for you and meal timing, and we look at environment, we look at vitamin and mineral status and addressing pathogens and hormones, as well as supporting these detoxification enzyme pathways. So there's a lot of information contained within, and I promise we're going to break this all down in further detail as we work through the masterclass. But ultimately, the intervention goals are going to be identifying and removing any triggers that have been looked at through the histamine bucket. And then it's about changing the environment around you. And that overall is going to bring the stability that medications, supplements, and the low histamine diet is likely not going to be able to achieve. So I know that there's a lot there. You have access to this masterclass for life. I encourage you to go back, and if you don't understand it, just go back through, do your own research. But I will see you in session 3, where I will discuss the low histamine diet.